Welcome back to the Ruby Tuesday. We're going to be talking about Monkey Man, one of my most highly anticipated films of this year. Ever since I saw the trailer, I was like, I need to see that. But did it live up to my expectations? Really excited to talk about it. Let's jump in. An anonymous young man unleashes a campaign of vengeance against the corrupt leaders who murdered his mother and continue to systematically victimize the poor and powerless. So in this review, we're going to be talking about the score and soundtrack, the influences of the film, the action, the story and acting, the film's message and editing and transitions, along with, of course, the cinematography, the incredible costuming, and of course that end, what it's got in it in terms of adult content and in terms of the actual score when I wrap up. So let's get in. I don't normally start with the score or soundtrack for a film, but this one was evident to me that it was a character and I wanted to talk about it first. The score and the soundtrack for this is all over the place, and you may sit up in your seat and go like, well, that doesn't sound like it's a good thing. Well, actually in this case it is, because it works all of the time whenever it's being creative and going in places that really you don't think you need to think out of the box, you don't think it would quite work. For example, there's some heavy, I wouldn't say heavy metal, but heavy rock in amongst with an action scene that kind of leads into a sort of ballad anthem Indian song. And so it's this mix of religion and rock that circumnavigates an action scene. And that's kind of what they play throughout this. You have your classical mixed in with something else. It kind of takes what we know, the genres of music, and then I guess displays them in a different sort of tone and event. So what you're getting is definitely a character all on its own that I guess heightens the scenes that it needs to, but also embellishes some of those that more dramatic moments, so that what you're getting here for score and atmosphere is something special. When you get that soundtrack, the mix of that score in there, what you get is obviously thought out. You know, you have some filmmakers that think about the score. I know Tarantino has often thought about what songs he's going to have in the movie before he makes the movie. I'm not sure if that's the case here, but it's definitely something you may want to listen out for when you go and watch this film. And talking about the influences of this film, a lot of people are going to compare it to John Wick. But I would say this is almost adult John Wick. John Wick is brutal in places, but it tends to hold back on some of the violence and gore that we see. You think about the old classic horror films or violent martial art films that we had back in the day. That is kind of what you get here. I would say it's less pretty than John Wick in its movements, but it's as brutal as a early John Woo film. It has influences of that Indian culture mixed in with religion and politics. That is definitely a massive influence between the poor, the disparity of the poor and the rich and those in power. That is kind of all the influence you have in here, as well as something like Kickboxer. You think about the old Jean-Claude Van Damme film, definitely has influences like that, or Bloodsport.
Time to separate the men from the boys.
If you want to take those, it's a spattering of that, and that's kind of what you get in here. Now, the action is something that a lot of people are going to talk about in this, because you have a sort of Krav Maga style of action in it. There are two main big action sequences in here. And you don't just get action for the sake of it. You have to earn it. There's a big chunk of story before we get a main action sequence, like 45 minutes. It's building character and moving development, and you have an incredible look. But when there's action, it creates a sort of ballet on screen in amongst with that score and soundtrack, that what you get to see when you have two massive action sequences, one in the middle, one at the end. They are purposeful, but they also don't get tiring because they change it up. The creativity of the action sequences, the use of mirrors, the use of location differences, aesthetics, all of that plays a huge part into what you're seeing on screen. So it can be brutal, and it is. It can be gory and bloody, and it is. But it's the way we see what our character gets, what he's using. All of that creates a really interesting dynamic for action. So you've seen a lot of it before, like between the Raid films and John Wick films. You shove those in together and you have sort of that Indian influence, and it's something that is really quite fun. And talking about the story, as I said, there's a good 45 minutes of character development before we get to action story, setting us up for what is wrong, the disparity between that poor and the rich, the revenge storyline. There is also a fantastic leveling up moment about midway through, a sort of montage, you know, when our character's got to learn something about himself and actually do some learning. Again, referencing Kickboxer, when you see Jean-Claude Van Damme kicking that bamboo and he's hurting his shin. We have a wonderful montage, but here again, it's really creative. It's a sort of dance between the beat of the heartbeat of the film even, but the beat, the sound score, again, bringing that in, using that as part of the montage is just wonderful. And that's kind of why I love this film, for its story, because we are on the revenge storyline. We care about our main protagonist because of how bad the bad guys are, how evil they are. They showcase that. They don't get much more kind of development. You kind of see what they're capable of. They show us in a spattering throughout the film, but then we are totally on Dev Patel's side. And talking about Dev Patel, if we go to the acting, he is our main protagonist. There's a few other characters that you sort of get to know and that you care about, like I mentioned with the bad guys. But Dev Patel, this is a labor of love. He's written, acted, directed, produced. There are other writers and producers, but this is, you know, everything for him. And it took so much to get this film made. In fact, they ran out of money at one stage and then were using a GoPro and a phone. And I didn't notice this. I thought, well, that's incredible. And he broke a wrist. He broke some ribs and fingers. He filmed during COVID. It was a really tough shoot, but what came out of that is something magical. The performance of Dev Patel here is something incredible. So it's not just the fact that he can do the action, which is great. It's how he performs the action with the emotion that we are given from his character. Because it is a revenge story, we see an array of anger on him. It's like someone that is tortured, that cannot hold himself back. He is just so tormented by what has happened in his past that his life is just anger, and we see that all on his face at many times throughout the film, showcased beautifully through an array of emotions. The film's message is interesting because it's not just a revenge story. There's the politics of it, the disparity between the poor and the rich. There is this kind of equality that they're trying to go for, but it's never at the expense of the movie. It's never at the expense of the adventure that you're having on screen, what we want to see the fun had. It's never at the expense of the actual story, the drama of following our character as he's gone through something horrific and then moving forward into, you know, the three-tiered arc, the classic middle, beginning, and end. It has all of that, but there's so much more that is layered in here. One of the biggest themes of this is finding purpose in yourself that is more about you, but finding purpose in maybe standing for more than yourself. And I like that. I thought that was excellent. When it comes to the editing and transition, I think this is often an underdog that people don't talk about. The editing and transitions together, and obviously transitions is part of the editing, but sometimes it's so cleverly done you kind of just want to mention it. The editing here is flawless, but in ways that you're probably not going to expect. We often have some sequences as we are shown what has happened in the past. They are flashbacks, but they're not that classical, you know, fade or kind of dream sequences somebody will look. The way they use it is flawlessly done, cleverly done, but doesn't ever detract away from you as a viewer, the story of the path that we're going. It's always pushing that story forward, and you don't get distracted or sidetracked as to like where you are, what's happening. It's just always moving that story forward. Very cleverly done. When it comes to showing memories from our main protagonist in films, it's often done in a way that just kind of detracts you or really slows up the pacing. That doesn't do it in here. It is slow in moments, but it's needed, and it's felt like it adds weight to this film. I do like me some Indian cinematography, although this is not, I don't believe he's Indian. Sharon Mir. He's known for cinematography for Coach Carter and Whiplash. Has an array of great cinematography credits to his name. I do think that this is his best work so far. And the reason I say that is the usage of showcasing color palettes for different set designs, different locations, and getting the message across of what you're trying to tell. So when you have beautiful landscapes, you're still trying to tell an emotional story of what's going on in that moment. You're trying to get the message that the director wants from the actors, and you have to place that in the zone. You have to showcase that brilliantly using different light designs. There's a lot of complementary light in this, like different neon colors or reds and grays and blues, and sometimes very bright, to show the different state of mind our character is in or what's going forward. You just have to study some of Quentin Tarantino's action movies to see the different palettes and tones, especially stuff like Kill Bill. And that's what I found in here. There were moments in this that were so vibrant. There's the poster shot of this particular film where you see our main protagonist come up in a lift, and as the lift opens, the light is just red, and it definitely says, okay, this is what's happening. Brutal, bloody, violent, and angry. You know, that's the emotion it's portraying. Brilliantly done. I think some people will want me to talk about the costume design, which I think is impeccable in all places. I particularly love the aesthetics and the creepiness of the monkey mask that you get here. It's a character as well. There is so much deeper lore to talk about that is steeped in the religion of why the monkey mask is a character defining moments in this. From when our character uses the mask and puts it on in a fighting ring, from when our character takes the mask off. It's very cleverly used as not a gimmick, but as a MacGuffin almost, to showcase what our character is going through or what our character represents. Again, wonderful costume design that's moving forward story or giving character development, which is excellent. When it comes to the adult content in this is one of the few 18s I've seen in a while from the BBFC rating system. I think it's earned. There's a lot of gore and blood in this. There's quite a bit of nudity and sex, and there is a lot of intense moments that are very adult in nature, along with a lot of heavy swearing. So I would say if you're squeamish, this might not be the one for you. For me, this is an easy 5 Nicolas Cages out of 5.
You got one.
Film. I don't know that I've given a 5 this year. I don't think even June 2 got a 5 for me. It was close to it, but this is such a ride. I really want to own this. I want to study it because I love film. I want to know about the making of it, the commentary, all of that. I want to know everything about this movie because I was mesmerized from beginning to end. So let me know, when you've seen it, what did you think? Sure, lots of people will hate this and say it was boring or too slow, but for me, this is a tour de force of film. It's the reason why I love cinema. Sometimes you get those films that are just, for you, gonna be memories, like a core memory, you know, moments when you remember watching The Gladiator for the first time, The Matrix for the first time, those sort of films that stick out. For me, this will be one of them. Such a wild, intense ride. Thanks so much for watching. Check out my other reviews I've dropped this week. Don't forget, we're going live with Movies and Munchies, talking about the best thing we watched this week, along with a spattering of other new Patreon videos that starts at £1. That's called The Bearded Ones, again, that I do with Chris from Movies and Munchies. We have a wonderful collaboration of content growing there, nice group and community of people that, you know, are really supporting us there, and they get to, depending on the tier they're on, ask us whether they want to watch a movie, a TV series, even join us for a video. So check it out. All that stuff is in the description. Thanks so much for joining me, but most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.